Imagine turning on your TV, expecting a routine interview, and instead witnessing a moment so sharp, so unexpected, that it flips centuries of linguistic arrogance on its head in real time. This is the story of how a BBC reporter tried to mock Filipino English and ended up getting schooled live on air in a way the internet would never forget. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you'll never hear accent the same way again. It started like any other international interview. Calm lighting, pullet smiles, the familiar polished tone of a global news broadcast. The BBC reporter, confident and composed, introduced the segment with an air of authority that viewers had been trained to trust. Across the screen was a Filipino guest, articulate, relaxed, and clearly experienced. Nothing about the setup hinted at what was about to unfold. The topic was language, specifically English usage in the Philippines. A seemingly harmless subject. But then the reporter leaned in slightly, smirked just enough to be noticed, and made a comment that sounded innocent on the surface, but carried a sharp edge underneath. He referred to Filipino English as if it were a watered-down version of real English. He joked about pronunciation. He questioned whether Filipinos were confused about the language because of American influence. To some viewers, it might have sounded like casual banter. To others, especially those who understood the weight of history, it was something else entirely. It was condescension dressed up as curiosity. And for a brief moment, it seemed like the reporter expected laughter, agreement, maybe even embarrassment from the Filipino guest. What he got instead was the Filipino guest smiled, not nervously, not defensively, but knowingly. Then, spoke, calm, clear, confident. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult the reporter. He didn't even sound angry, and that's what made it devastating. He began by explaining that English is an official language of the Philippines, not a borrowed novelty, not a broken imitation, an official language, embedded in education, law, government, and media for over a century. He pointed out that the Philippines consistently ranks among the top English-speaking countries in the world, that Filipino professionals teach English internationally, that call centers, aviation, medicine, and maritime industries rely heavily on Filipino English speakers because of their clarity and adaptability. The reporter nodded, but you could tell he wasn't expecting this direction. Then came the turning point. The Filipino guest gently asked the reporter a question in return. He asked which English the BBC considered correct. British English, American English, Australian English, South African English, Indian English, Nigerian English. He paused just long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable, and then he delivered the line that would echo across social media. English doesn't belong to Britain anymore. You could see the shift instantly. The reporter blinked. His smile tightened. The power dynamic cracked. The guest continued, explaining that English is a global language shaped by history, migration, and culture. That every country adapts it. That accents are not mistakes, they are evidence of ownership. He pointed out that British English itself is not the same English spoken 300 years ago. That language evolves wherever people live, work, and think. And then, with surgical precision, he addressed the mockery. He explained that what some people call Filipino English is actually a standardized, studied, and legitimate variety of world Englishes. It has its own grammar patterns, vocabulary, and rhythm. It's taught in universities, researched by linguists, used in international diplomacy and business. All live, all calm, all undeniable. The BBC reporter tried to recover. He laughed lightly, attempted to reframe the comment as just curiosity. But the damage was done. Viewers could feel it. This was no longer an interview, it was a lesson. And the lesson went deeper than language, because what was really being challenged wasn't pronunciation. It was hierarchy. For centuries, accents have been used as tools of power to decide who sounds intelligent, who sounds educated, who sounds proper. Colonial history taught the world that sounding British or later. American meant authority. Everyone else was trying. The Filipino guest dismantled that idea without ever saying the word colonialism. He didn't need to. The history was implicit. The Philippines was colonized for over 300 years, first by Spain, then by the United States. English was imposed. Yes, but Filipinos didn't just adopt it. They mastered it. They localized it. They made it their own. And that's the part that unsettles people, because once a language stops belonging to one group, it stops being a symbol of superiority. As the clip spread online, reactions exploded. Filipinos across the world shared it with pride. Linguists applauded the response. Teachers used it in classrooms. Diaspora communities felt seen, and many viewers, especially from former colonies, recognized the moment instantly. They'd lived it. They'd been corrected for their accents, mocked for their pronunciation, told they sounded funny or wrong, all while speaking a language they learned in schools, studied formally, and used professionally every day. And here was someone, live on one of the world's biggest news platforms, calmly saying, "Enough. What made the moment go viral wasn't drama. It was dignity. No southing, no insults, just facts, confidence, and a refusal to accept linguistic shame." The BBC later downplayed the incident. Some defended the reporter, saying he didn't mean it that way. But intention stopped mattering, because impact had already spoken, and the impact was global. People began revisiting uncomfortable questions. Why do we associate intelligence with certain accents? Why are some pronunciations considered neutral, while others are labeled strong? Why is English spoken by millions in Asia or Africa treated as inferior to English spoken by a few million in Britain? The answer is not linguistic. It's historical. English spread through empire, through trade, conquest, education systems designed to replicate British norms. But the world has changed. The majority of English speakers today are not native speakers from the UK or US. They are bilingual, multilingual people from countries like India, Nigeria, Singapore, Kenya, and the Philippines. In fact, Filipinos are among the most proficient English speakers in Asia. Their accent is often described as clear, neutral, and globally intelligible. That's why Filipino teachers are in demand worldwide. That's why Filipino nurses, seafarers, engineers, and customer service professionals work internationally with ease. Mocking that reality isn't just inaccurate, it's outdated. And that's what the BBC reporter failed to realize. In that moment, he was speaking from an old-world assumption in a new-world reality. The Filipino guest, on the other hand, was completely aware of where he stood. Not defensive, not apologetic, just grounded. That confidence is what made the moment unforgettable. Because when you stop trying to prove you belong and simply act like you already do, the conversation changes. After the broadcast, linguists weighed in. They explained that World English is a recognized field of study, that there is no single correct English, anymore only context-appropriate English, that mutual intelligibility matters more than accent conformity. In other words, if you're understood, you're doing it right. Simple, powerful, liberating. And yet, so many people still struggle with accent insecurity. They soften their voices, change their pronunciation, apologize before speaking. Or because somewhere along the way, they were taught that sounding like themselves wasn't the good. Inog. That's why this moment resonated so deeply. It wasn't just about Filipino English. It was about reclaiming voice. The Filipino guest didn't just defend a dialect. He modeled what linguistic confidence looks like. He showed that you can challenge arrogance without aggression, that you can correct ignorance without humiliation. And in doing so, he flipped the script. The mocker became the student. The interviewee became the authority. Live on air, in front of the world. By the end of the clip, the reporter looked smaller, not because he was attacked, but because his assumptions had nowhere left to stand. That's the power of truth, delivered calmly. And that's why this moment still circulates today. Because every time someone with an accent hears it, they're reminded of something essential. Your voice is not broken. Your English is not inferior. Your accent is not a mistake. It's history. It's identity. It's proof that the language traveled and survived. And if anyone ever tries to mock it, now, they might just get schooled.